You want to spend 70% of your time on the process I just described: clienting, outreach, follow up, all that stuff, taking people through your sales process. That includes getting them to commit to a discovery session and selling them your program at some point. The rest of the things that you need to do in your coaching business should only be 30%. All the other stuff, it can matter. Absolutely, it can matter. But it doesn't matter nearly as much as having the conversations, getting into conversation with people. In some ways, you have to do marketing, right? You have to put yourself out there. But coaches always complain, like, I have a leads problem, I have a leads problem. But at the end of the day, even if they had the leads, they wouldn't know how to convert those leads into clients. So they actually have a sales problem. And so if somebody like gave you all these leads, you'd have to meet with them all, and then you have to know what to do with them. What do you do in that first connection with somebody? What do you do in that first message with somebody? What do you do in the discovery call? Hey, it's Daniel, and you are about to watch a clip from our free podcast, The Coach's Journey, where we help you navigate the surprisingly difficult path of building a coaching business by people who are actually doing it. And we go live, raw and unedited every week in our free Facebook community. All right, Coaches Nation, welcome to another edition of the Coach's Journey podcast. I'm Daniel Fernandes, and today I want to talk about productivity, getting organized as an entrepreneur. We're really just talking about productivity in a way, but there's a lot of pieces of this, and I want to say, like, okay, why is entrepreneurship so hard? I'll talk about that today, and also like productive towards getting clients is kind of the big deal here. So I want to talk about what that means today. And also, there's a few little tools and tricks and tips that I'm going to share today around all of those things. So this is going to be, I'm going to go through this pretty quick. So you might want to grab a pen, take notes. And if you like this podcast, please do comment below, share with other coaches, because we are here to support coaches. This is what we do. Real coaches supporting other coaches on this podcast, and as well as in our community at cmc.coach. So feel free to join our free Facebook. But let's get started. Let's talk about entrepreneurship and why entrepreneurship is harder in some ways than other jobs, especially if you transitioned from a W-2 job or a full-time job working for someone else. One of the challenges with entrepreneurship is the autonomy. And maybe your job had some autonomy, maybe it didn't. But like we all like have this idea of entrepreneurship as being flexible, as being freedom, as being autonomous. You know, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the boss now. So that is true. But it also comes with a double-edged sword of, yes, now you have all the freedom, but of course you also have all the freedom so you can constantly do the opposite of what you need to do. You can constantly avoid what you don't want to do. You can constantly not build your sales pipeline. And if your job wasn't in sales before, now you're in a job or not a job, but you know, you're in your own business. You're an entrepreneur. You're in a job role where you need to do that. Like when you become an entrepreneur, suddenly you're in charge of marketing, you're in charge of sales, you're in charge of delivery, you're in charge of operations. There's so many pieces of this puzzle. And it's really important to acknowledge entrepreneurship has many, many, many lenses. And that's one of the challenges with entrepreneurship is because each of those different parts of the business, and there's many pieces of it, come with their own emotional layers, their own operational layers, their own logistical layers, their own legal questions. There's so many parts. Like even just like receiving money, you might have emotional issues around that, but you might also have a PayPal issue. You know, like there's so many. That never happens when you're in a regular job working for someone else, because half of the business is not handled by you usually, like more than half. Like you have your own piece of that business where you're hired to do a role, but there's other departments and other things that are happening in the business that make the machine tick. The coaching business at the beginning, especially, you're the one who makes all of it tick. So imagine you were the marketing department, the sales department, the operations department, the content department, the delivery department, everything, all of it. You're all of it. So that's, you know, a huge overwhelming mountain, especially for first-time entrepreneurs, because you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing. So that's a big piece of it. There's this like autonomy is a double-edged sword, right? It's your greatest strength because you can decide how things should go, but it's also your greatest weakness because nobody's watching you that way. Nobody's directing you that way. And self-directing yourself is hard. And I would ask you to look at your calendar. Like, does your calendar represent what it should as an entrepreneur? And you probably don't know if you're a new entrepreneur. And if you are an experienced entrepreneur, you probably have some idea of whether that's true or not. And a lot of the time, entrepreneurs fall into the trap of getting more done versus not, versus getting the more impactful stuff done. It's like, oh, I have a huge to-do list. Yeah, we have this badge of honor of being busy. But the truth is, as an entrepreneur, you have to start being very judicious and discerning what should not get done, right? Because there's always going to be infinite things to get done. And so how do you avoid that overwhelm as an entrepreneur? It's different than it is when you have a very structured role, or if that you have clear outcomes and clear clear processes to follow. You have to build those yourself as a coach, and it's going to be different. In most coaching businesses, there are some similarities for sure, but you have to build your own process, and that's one of the things that will make your particular business unique. So there's definitely benefits to being your own business entrepreneur, but there's also drawbacks, right? So I just wanted to set the stage with this entrepreneurship challenge, right? And if you're in a coaching business specifically, there's a few other big challenges, right? And getting organized as an entrepreneur is first like getting a handle on this is different. You might need support. You might need to learn things you didn't know. I remember when I became an entrepreneur, I was like, how hard could it be? I'm already really good at this other thing that I do. So, but when you become an actual entrepreneur, it's just it's very different. And so just recognizing that and just like giving yourself some grace, like, of course you haven't figured it out yet because you're in a new world. That's okay. And even as an entrepreneur, who's been in that role for a long time, I haven't figured everything else out, and I give myself grace because there's always another level to learn. So that being said, let's talk about the thing that coaches want. Coaches, when they want to get organized, like what are they getting organized for? Like what is the productivity that they want? Like it's not just getting more tasks done, it's actually getting the things that move the needle forward. And usually the impact that coaches want in their business and in their productivity is more clients on their roster. You have to understand what actually creates clients on your roster. And so, like, if you're going to get organized as an entrepreneur, the thing you need to organize is where is your time going? That is actually like the fundamental question for all workers, for all, not just for workers, for all humans. Where's your time going? For coaches specifically, how much of your activity is directly supporting the main goal that you have? I'm going to assume for this podcast that your main goal is adding more clients to your roster, right? And I'm going to walk through some of the ways to get yourself organized in this area, but also some of the things that hold you back. And so, how much of your activity is going to directly supporting client flow if that's your number one goal? And if it's not your number one goal, it's probably a goal. Let's talk about that there. But all these questions apply to whatever your goals are. So, like, I want to talk about getting clients. So, the bread and butter, sometimes I call it clienting. What this activity includes is like outreach, follow up, relationship management. The things we sometimes call pipeline building or business development, tracking your contacts. This is all part of getting organized as a coach. Are you doing that activity? How much of your time is spent on this activity, right? And I want you to be honest with yourself. Like, if you look at your calendar, how much of your time is reserved for it? How much of time is actually blocked out for important work that you're actually doing that work? And are you committed to that work? Because it's really easy to stop the work. So the work we're talking about here is doing outreach, which is making connections with people. In some ways, you have to do marketing, right? You have to put yourself out there. But coaches always complain, like, I have a leads problem, I have a leads problem. But at the end of the day, even if they had the leads, they wouldn't know how to convert those leads into clients. So they actually have a sales problem. And so if somebody like gave you all these leads, you'd have to meet with them all, and then you have to know what to do with them. What do you do in that first connection with somebody? What do you do in that first message with somebody? What do you do in the discovery call? These are all part of what I will call a sales process, a process of getting to know somebody and identify whether this person can become a client or not, and whether they should, and then making an offer and invitation to them. That's all part of the process, right? But you have to understand it's very relational and it's very it involves a lot of human communication here, right? So all that outreach work is part of that sales process. And so I'm going to call it clienting and outreach and follow up. How much time are you spending there? Because, like I said, it's really easy to stop when you're busy. Even if you get a few clients, and then you might, like if you're a more advanced coach and you have more or less full roster, are you doing any business development? Because if you're not, when one of your clients leaves, now you have to get back into the game of business development. Have you been nurturing your folks? Have you been in touch with past clients? Have you been following up on referrals? Even with a full roster, I think it's really important. And I've seen this over and over again. Almost every single person I've ever heard say they're really busy with work, myself included, gets to a point where they forget to do the biz dev, or they deprioritize. They say, "Oh, I've got lots of work. I'm going to focus on delivery," and they don't do any biz dev. They don't do any outreach. And then when the biz dev when the current work dries up, or somebody graduates from the program, or if they don't restart it back up because they're out of practice. So it's really important, even when you're full on your roster, to continue that business development process, which is the outreach and the follow up and stuff. You need to have a system around that, and that just always stays sacred. Because if clienting and outreach is not sacred, your pipeline dries up, right? So let's talk about like how you need to think about this so that your calendar actually represents that primary goal. You want to spend 70% of your time on the process I just described: clienting, outreach, follow up, all that stuff, taking people through your sales process. That includes getting them to commit to a discovery session and selling them your program at some point. The rest of the things that you need to do in your coaching business should only be 30%. All the other stuff, it can matter. Absolutely, it can matter. But it doesn't matter nearly as much as having the conversations. Getting into conversation with people is the bread and butter of a coaching business. And the more you do that, the easier clienting gets and the easier sales become. That's how you get your sales chops, by actually doing it. And it's really, really easy to avoid it. And the 30% of everything else, like, oh, I got to work on my business card. I got to work on the website. I got to work on, the other, I have to like do AI stuff. Whatever it is, it can take over your entire 100% of your time. There's just so much other stuff you could do. There's infinite amount of time you could spend doing all that stuff. And that stuff is actually usually easier for coaches to do. But I want you to keep it into that 30% because if you're having the conversations and the outreach, that is what feeds the need to do projects and things with the rest of your business, right? So if it doesn't fall into the clienting, outreach, follow up, relationship building, taking people to your sales process bucket, it's in the 30%. Okay. So that's principle number one. 70%, 30%. Okay. If you can do that work, but keep it to 30%, don't let it expand past that. Otherwise, you will continue to deprioritize your clienting. And why is that? Why am I saying this so much? It's because clienting is like from coaches over and over again, we hear constantly, it's the hardest thing. And one of the challenges is that they don't have a system to track this stuff, the coaches. The other one is that it's the nature of coaching work, right? Which is it's that it's very relational and therefore emotional. So I'll get back to the tracking things, but I want like there's so many aspects of a coaching business. It's like simultaneously emotional. It's very personal. It's relational with other people. It's strategic. You got to build your business in a certain way. You got to know where your business is heading. You have to be thoughtful about what's important. What are you trying to build? Why are you doing it? It's creative. It's creative work. It takes a lot of output to do a coaching session. It's a high emotional barrier for many people. And as you build those muscles, you start learning to lift at that next level of energy. It's also operational, right? It's financial. There's so many different parts of this. And the hardest part over and over again for people is that emotional, relational aspect of building up a pipeline of people who become your clients. That can feel really tricky. And I get it, like especially early on in my coaching business, I felt salesy, I felt pushy, I felt icky. I didn't want to follow up with people. I didn't want to feel needy. But that doesn't have to be how it feels. So I encourage you, if somebody is in your pipeline who you need to follow up with, write it down, right? Write down their name somewhere. So like this goes to the next point I want to make, which is like, how do you track this pipeline process? How do you track relationships, right? You got to get organized. You got to organize your relationshiping, which sounds really weird. Like, why should I like write down their names and like this is relational, isn't it? Yes, it's relational, but it's also very intentional. To be intentional about your relationships, especially as you start to lose track of them. If you have more than four people in your pipeline, it's easy to lose track. Even with four people, you can lose track. Oh, I forgot to email Buddy because like he sent me a question or whatever, and I just never got back to him. Or I made an offer. Like you've got somebody all the way through your pipeline making an offer, and they're thinking about it, and you just let it go. I've done that. I know, I get it. And sometimes you get busy, and I get it. But that's why you have to prioritize that clienting and follow-up and outreach piece, so you don't lose track of those people who are warm leads for you. So one simple place for all your leads, right? And it could be a place that includes other people, but there's an aspect of the coaching business that I think to help you see how to get organized here, you have to think of yourself as a network builder. You're not just trying to make people become your clients. You're building your network of contacts. That's valuable in so many ways. One is it connects you to more people. And the more people that know you and like you and trust you, the greater the value of your network to start with. But the more support you have, the more support you can give, the more impact you can have. And like, there's this $1 million sits in like the first one or two layers of your network. But that means you have to actually actively and intentionally explore your network because you don't know where it is. You don't know what kind of relationships you can build with people. Sometimes they might become clients. Sometimes you might need to become their client. Sometimes you may actually be able to collaborate with somebody. Sometimes you meet somebody that you have an opportunity to do something valuable with that has nothing to do with your business. Maybe you meet somebody who's like into jazz music like you, and then you can like write some music together because that's something you've always wanted to do. I don't know what your goals are, but whatever your goals are, your network is a huge opportunity for you to actually achieve them. In fact, going through the people in your network can actually make you go so much faster than if you didn't do it. if you try to do everything on your own, which is actually another big piece of the coaching business. You cannot run a coaching business by yourself because you need people in your network to become your clients at the very least. You also probably need support. You need other coaches around you. That's why CMC exists. If you need a community like that, and you don't have a community of support, go to cmc.coach, join our Facebook group, come to some of our workshops if we have one coming up, which we do on June the 10th. You should come to that. You should register for it and get yourself around other coaches. Make sure you're getting into a place where other coaches who are actively building their business, not the coaches who are just like kicking tires. That will actually not necessarily speed you up as much. It can be helpful. The people who are practicing their coaching, I'm totally all for that. But if you want to build your business, you need to be active building your business, spending 70% of your time on the clienting process, the outreach and follow up, and taking people through your sales process. And you also need to be spending um, that 30% of your time on everything else. And that includes your own professional development. That includes building relationships with coaches, which, that sometimes those coaches can become your clients. So that could actually be in the 70%, really. But getting support for the challenging parts of this business. This is a business. It's not just, oh, you show up and talk to people and that's all you do. There's actually a lot more to it. And the deeper you go into this, the more you realize it's actually emotionally complex, let alone like intellectually complex too. So have a simple place for your follow-ups. Whether like I use a spreadsheet, you can use Trello, you can use whatever format you need. Make sure you know who is on the track is on your list for follow-ups, right? And what kind of you can have different categories of follow-ups. So you have maybe one list for people who are currently people you're connecting, like connection level contacts. You have one list of people who actually, I think these could be leads. These are people who have expressed the need for support, or we've connected over coaching. Maybe you've offered them a connection call, or I would call that internally, I would call that a qualification call to see if they'd be a great fit or not. But maybe you've offered them a discovery session. You should have a list for this. Like, where are they at in the stage? Like, what process? So, if I were to ask you, like, how many people do you have discovery sessions with coming up on the calendar? You should know that from your list. If I ask you how many people do you have connection calls or pre-discovery calls with, you should know that. If I have how many people are you in contact with, you should know that. And lastly, how many people have you made an offer to? You should know that. Here's a couple other bonus ones. You should know how many people have suggested a referral or who have promised a referral. That's slightly different. If you say in a session like, hey, who do you know? Which I highly recommend you asking people if they had a great session, especially a discovery session. Hey, do you know anybody else who would benefit from this type of session? You kind of see what I do now. And they'll think, oh, I know like Jill and I know John. And then you say, great, you write those down. And then when you do the follow-up call with them, you say, hey, remember you said Jill and John, you still think they would be a great candidate for coaching? Yeah, okay, great. Let's connect. And here's how you do it. And so you can actually have a list for referrals, and that gives you extra touch points with people. Also, big one, who promised a testimonial? Have you been asking for testimonials? If you have, who asked for a testimonial? Who goes in that list? Do you know offhand who all those lists are? That is the essence of your 70%. If you have that list, you know what to do when you have your clienting time on the calendar, which you should have plenty of. If you don't put it on the calendar, it's possibly because you don't know what to do. You don't have your list. So there's going to be some investment you need to make to get organized. By the way, getting organized in this area is part of the 70%. So if you do nothing else, just spend 70% of your time getting all these people in your head into a list, right? Don't capture this in your head. It's too much for any human. And you can also use AI here, but it might be simpler just to create your lists. And AI can help you do that too. I'm not against AI at all in this area, but you also need to like take responsibility for it. So tracking the relationships is part of the game. But again, like the nature of the challenge is actually emotional in nature. What are you avoiding is like the key question for today. What have you been avoiding? You got to name that avoidance, right? And you might not even be able to name it. You don't have to name it to be able to actually overcome it by doing the things we just talked about in that 70%. But you're usually avoiding it because it's hard, right? I avoid it because it's hard. And then I notice my avoidance and I do it anyway. But you got to train yourself. You got to train yourself to not avoid conflict, not avoid potential challenges that you're not sure you can handle. Like, what if this person doesn't want to meet with me? Or what if this person doesn't think it was a good session? What is this person like? What if I made a mistake in the sales process and now this person's relationship is burned? That stuff will happen. That's how you learn. You have to be willing to make the mistakes and repair them if you can, when that happens. And I've had people that I've taken through the client sales process, even this year, where I made mistakes, and those relationships are not the greatest. As a result, there's not a problem by any means, but like I know I'm not gonna be able to turn this person into a client, and there's a little bit of awkwardness there, but I'm okay with that because that's how I learned, right? I learned, hey, I'm never gonna do that again because that is what led to that situation. Now you can get ahead of the game by being in community with coaches who are talking about these questions, but you're going to make some mistakes and it's okay. Are you okay with making those mistakes? That's part of getting organized as a coach, which is having your list, following up with them, seeing the effects of those interactions that you're having and improving because you've been organizing yourself that way. And when you're organized, it's actually easier to follow up because you're like, okay, I'm just going to do it because it's on my list at the very least, instead of like, oh, I should probably talk to Jill, but I'm kind of afraid of it at some level. And then you just find something else to distract yourself without even thinking about it. So that's like avoiding the real work, avoiding the hard relational work, because it's way easier to do other things. Like, let me go design my business card, you know. So I just wanted to leave you with a couple of quick thoughts. You got to create space. You got to create space in your calendar. You got to create enough space. You know, I think a coaching business you need at least 10 to 12 hours, probably 10 minimum, but 12 really to really do this work, which means you're spending maybe 9 of those 12 hours, 9 to 10 of those on the 70% stuff, the clienting, the outreach, the follow up, all that stuff. And the rest of it, you can do everything else that the business needs from you. So don't fill every calendar gap with things that you need to do. Like don't just go to webinars constantly. Definitely come to CMC workshop because we talk about this process exactly. If you're learning how to do the 70%, that is part of the 70%. Okay. And we have a workshop on that at CMC June 10th. You should come go to cmc.coach/workshop to register for that. That June 10th workshop is specifically about how to do the 70%. So, and sometimes the challenge is like, I don't really know how to do it. Or I don't really know the best practices and I don't understand that sales process because that is actually a particularly difficult process for people to just magically understand. Because you have to position yourself at every step of the way in a way that actually leads to building trust and leads to building relationships. Okay, so don't fill every gap you have in your calendar with things that aren't this. Put that in the 30%. But if it's clienting, 70%. I can't say it enough. And then lastly, what are you avoiding right now? Who are the people that you're avoiding following up with? Who are the people that you're avoiding getting back to? Make that list right, even if it's just a piece of paper, write them down. Take that time right now before you do anything else after this podcast, write them down, and then that will be your action plan. That's the 70% right there. Spend 70% of your coaching time on that part. And if you don't have anybody on that list, go figure out how to get people on that list. You have a network of tons of people. You have people in your Facebook, you have people in your LinkedIn, you have people from your high school, you have people from your previous employees, you have people across your families, extended family. It's not about turning them all into clients. It's actually asking them who they know and asking them for referrals. Maybe some of them will become clients. Maybe some of them will have discovery sessions, but always be asking who do they know? How can they support you? Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to go into your network and ask those questions? How can we support each other? And find out what they need. And sometimes they will be perfect clients for you, and sometimes they won't, in which case they can open up their network for you, and vice versa. So, with that, I hope this helped you think about how to get organized as an entrepreneur and think about productivity as an entrepreneur and that double edged sword of autonomy that you have. Use it wisely and spend a lot of your time on the business development side of it, the clienting, outreach, and follow up. That is where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Okay, if you like this podcast, please share it with other coaches. Please also comment below wherever you're watching it and come to our workshop, cmc.coach/workshop. Join our free community at cmc.coach. We'd love to support you in your coaching business. I'll see you next time.